Your point about Russia, I've asked Republican members of Congress specifically, let's say Putin steamrolls Ukraine, there could be a World War III on our hands. That's what other lawmakers and politicians have said. But some Republicans I've talked to said that type of language is fear mongering. Do you think that's fear mongering? What do you make of their characterization?
So, first, I would characterize this as all Republican congressmen should visit Ukraine. After touring the battlefield, meeting with the Ukrainian leadership, military and civilian, and President Zelensky, if you walk out of there saying, we don't need to help these guys, I respect you. I would say the number of people that might do that, instead of the 115 plus House Republicans that are opposed, you might end up with 15. But, they actively refuse to go do that visit because this isn't fear mongering. Putin is not, some cozy bear who's misunderstood. Zelensky is not a Nazi. Ukraine is a democracy. Russia is an authoritarian regime attempting to exert its way. If we don't step in here, when a big country tries to do this to a small country, first, what do we stand for? Do we stand for just the USA? I would be disappointed. I served in our military for 40 years. My son's serving now. I would be disappointed if all we stood for was, what can we get out of this? But on top of it, it is in our national security interest, both economically and future conflict-wise, to take care of Russia now. Let's be clear. We've spent total, the $60 billion in security assistance we've given is less than 2% of our defense spending over the same time frame of the last 2 years. So for less than 2% of our own defense spending, we've been able, which some of those same House Republicans say is, fraudulent anyway, for less than 2% of that, we've been able to stymie the world's largest ground army and support a democracy standing for itself. I think that's a phenomenal return on investment. It's not fear mongering. It's doing the right thing. And before you say that, you need to visit Ukraine, talk to Zelensky in person, and then come out. And if you still think that way, I respect you for it. Otherwise, I think you're just blowing hot steam.
To your point, do you think the Republican Party is becoming more isolationist?
Well, certainly the Senate isn't, right? We saw that in the Senate. They're not. Nikki Haley doesn't sound like that. Many, many, many of the Republican candidates running for president did not sound like that. And I think very close to a majority of the House Republicans don't sound like that. I think it's a very close vote right now. But if the Senate supports it, broadly, Senate Republicans, and we're very close in the House, I would say the Republican Party is at a precipice. Then they can still take a step in the right direction. So I certainly haven't given up hope at all in that regard. I think there's absolutely an opportunity here. And look, there's a little bit of politics involved in this, between the two presumptive presidential candidates. And so I think if you were to remove that from the room, you might get a slightly different vote that would show that more House Republicans support this than don't. Very few House Republicans would say out loud, I think Vladimir Putin is an okay guy, or I think Vladimir Putin is someone I can work with. I think most of them understand exactly who Vladimir Putin is.
So if it wasn't an election year, do you think this would have a different turn?
Absolutely. It did. The last two votes that weren't election years were pretty clean through. And so I think absolutely politics has something to do with this. And that's unfortunate. Politics, is supposed to end at the water's edge. National security is supposed to be a bipartisan issue. There are places where both parties violate this, whether it's progressive Democrats complaining about our support to Israel or some House Republicans complaining about Ukraine. I think politics is way too much creeping into what should be a very clean discussion of U.S. national security interests.